Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining us today. Welcome to the third webinar of the UNEG Use of Evaluation Working Group for 2025. And we're going to see the theme, how UN evaluations influence external action insights on the use of UN evaluations beyond the UN. I am Natalia Costa, the Regional Evaluation Officer for Latin America and the Caribbean at WFP, and part of the UNEG Use Working Group Workstream 1 on Good Practices in Evaluation Use. I'm delighted to be moderating this session today. I see we have a lot of participants and we're really excited about this. So today we'll dive into the report commissioned by the UNEG Use Working Group Workstream 3 between November 2024 and April 2025 to explore how evaluations commissioned by the UN are perceived and used by stakeholders external to the UN system. In this hour, we will hear about the results of this study in terms of degree to which external stakeholders engage with UN commissioned evaluations, how they use the evidence provided, and what factors enhance or limit that use. I look forward to an engaging discussion with our speakers today, which I'll introduce shortly. So a bit about the working group before we start. A quick note. Our working group comprises 3 work streams and focuses on enhancing evaluation use across the UN system, supporting evidence-based advocacy, policymaking, and programming to drive greater effectiveness. If you'd like to learn more about the working group, you can visit the UNEG website or reach out to our working group coordinators. We'll share their details in the chat shortly. And now, a few quick housekeeping reminders. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterward, included on the UNEG YouTube channel. We'll have a Q&A session after the presentations. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat anytime. We'll aim to address as many questions as possible, but if we run out of time, we'll share the speaker's contact details in the chat. Lastly, we'll post a 1-question poll towards the end of the webinar. Your feedback will be helpful in shaping future events. So we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to answer the poll. So now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our 3 speakers today. Miriam Van Parijs is currently serving as Regional Evaluation Advisor at UNICEF for the MENA region, where she focuses on leveraging evidence to enhance child rights in the region. She has taken a particular interest in evaluation use since 2017 and has worked on it both conceptually and hands-on, testing out various concepts as an evaluation practitioner. She has significant international experience in public sector support and development, emphasizing her commitment to using evaluations for practical outcomes on the ground. Robert Strike currently serves as the Director of Internal Oversight of the Council of Europe, providing independent oversight through internal audit, evaluation, and investigation. His career of 32 years has mostly been dedicated to evaluation, program cycle management, and oversight. Before his current role, Robert served as a Regional Evaluation Advisor at UNICEF in the MENA region. Robert's career also includes roles such as Vice Chair of UNEG on Use of Evaluation, Chief of the Evaluation Division at UNRWA, Coordinator of Program Support at UNRWA, and various consultancy positions. One of his key interests has been how evaluations actually influence decision-making, leading to him being more involved in the UNEG Use of Evaluation Working Group. Thank you, Robert, for joining us. And last but not least, Anand Sivansakara is a public health and evaluation professional with over 30 years of experience at the local, national, and global events. He's currently serving as Senior Evaluation Officer at the WHO Evaluation Office, where he has managed, conducted, and supported over 50 thematic, programmatic, and country program evaluations. Prior to joining the Evaluation Office in 2014, Anand worked with the Department of Social Determinants of Health and Health Equity in WHO headquarters. Thank you, Anand, for joining us. Today, they'll share insights on the findings of the report, which I think will spark a very interesting discussion. Robert, Anand, and Miriam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and as well, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And as you heard already from the introduction, we're all very passionate about the use of evaluation. And indeed, this is not the first study that the use of evaluation did. I mean, at some point, we first looked into the pathways of how do we ensure use, but now we came to the point that we said, do we really know what is happening in the outside world? What is the demand side thinking? And for, at least in my personal role, for many years, I've had these assumptions that, yes, external stakeholders are keen to use the evaluation, and we use that as leverage internally for the various organizations that I worked at, that the evaluations would be important to do because it will be used by the external stakeholders. So we assumed there is a demand, but it was never really confirmed. So within this subgroup, we were very keen to figure out, is our assumption correct? Do we do things that then will have some influence at the donor level for funding decisions, for programmatic decisions? So once we came to that point, we then moved forward and looked into what is happening, but we are faced a very difficult time for the study because we are in a context of contraction of funding. We are also in a context where evaluations are not the only game in town, where there are other tools like dashboard synthesis, AI analysis competing for the attention, which makes it even more interesting to understand, is this something where the outside world believes it is worthwhile to use it? Is it credible? So what we are doing here is it's a conceptual study rather than sorry, it's a conceptual study that is not a synthesis, it's not a meta-analysis. So to do that, as a result, we will see what is true at this moment in time. It is not something that we necessarily believe will hold true for very long because the situation is changing so fast. When we were designing the methodology, we had to be opportunistic and adaptive. Given the situation, it was very difficult to look for contact points that were willing to spend time on this while they're repositioning themselves in the world of development, where US funding was going away, where everybody was scrambling. To do this, eventually, we selected two case studies, Uganda and Jordan, which we thought were reasonably representative, and we had some inroads, so we could do this. We were able to capture a combination of headquarters and country representatives, but obviously this is opportunistic, so we recognize there are potential biases in the study. Nevertheless, we believe it is solid enough to be presented, and it's solid enough to help us to make decisions on how we deal with the processes with donors. I just say, luckily for us, or happily for us, we have positive news. Overall, it seems that evaluations are appreciated. There is use at headquarters level, there's use at country level, and we have been able to identify some conditional factors to create more interest. And Anand and Miriam will go into more details on what actually we found. And I leave it at that and over to Anand.
Thank you, Robert. Perhaps you can start sharing the slides. Okay, move on to the slide 5, please. Yeah. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. And I will be presenting the key findings from our study on the current use of UN evaluation evidence by external stakeholders. And as we move through the slides, you'll also see how these findings can inform our future evaluation strategies and help us maximize the value of our work for decision makers at all levels. Move to the next slide, please. This slide is about patterns and purposes of evaluation use. We are all aware of different primary patterns of evaluation use. One is about the instrumental use, where when the evaluations directly inform operational and strategic decisions, such as designing of new programs and allocation of funding. The next one is conceptual use, which is more indirect, and evaluation support, where evaluation support reflection, learning, and strategic discussions, shaping broader understanding, even if they don't lead to immediate decisions. And the third one is the symbolic use, involving references to evaluations and to demonstrate accountability and transparency, especially in highly politicized environments. And these patterns often overlap, and stakeholders may use evaluations in more than one way, depending upon the context and needs. Next slide, please. Perceived value and impact. Different stakeholder groups perceive the value of UN evaluations differently, and across donors and country offices, headquarters, and partners, evaluations are seen as vital for reputational assurance, strategic alignment, and risk management. For example, donors may rely on evaluations to support funding decisions and partner assessments, whereas country officers use them to align interventions with local priorities. However, actual impact of evaluations on programming and policy can be uneven. While they're often cited in strategic documents, their ability to drive a substantive change depends on factors like methodological quality, timing, and alignment with stakeholder priorities. And this highlights the importance of not just producing evaluations, but ensuring they are timely, relevant, and actionable. Next slide, please. Enabling conditions for effective use of these evaluations. As I just mentioned, timeliness is crucial. Evaluations must be delivered in sync with decision-making windows to be influential. Accessibility in terms of concise, well-structured reports with clear executive summaries are far more likely to be used and read and discussed. And credibility and independence in terms of achieved through transparent methods and diverse data sources build trust in findings, and contextual relevance, which ensures that evaluations reflect the realities of specific country or thematic area, making recommendations more applicable. And finally, the stakeholder engagement, especially early involvement, boosts ownership and increases the likelihood of findings to be used. By focusing on these enablers, we can also make our evaluations more impactful and widely adopted. Next one, please. Influence on policies and programming. At the operational level, evaluations help recalibrate interventions and funding allocations. And at the policy level, they inform strategic planning and performance assessments. Evaluations also contribute to organizational learning and internal discourse, stimulating debate and enriching and understanding. Further, evaluations also inform adjustments in programming, portfolio composition, and partner selection. And importantly, They serve both formative and symbolic use roles, as mentioned earlier, shaping decisions and demonstrating accountability. While few evaluations alone determine policy shifts, they also contribute to accumulating knowledge that support evidence-informed decision-making across the UN system. Next one, please. Preferred formats and output characteristics. Individual evaluations are valued for their depth and specificity, especially at the operational level. However, synthesis reports are also preferred for high-level decision-making and provide comparative overviews across agencies and countries. Their utility depends on clarity and transparency. And both formats are important, and stakeholders call for more targeted, user-friendly synthesis outputs aligned with institutional priorities. And key output characteristics include clarity and focus, actionability, evidence, quality, and presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Anand. So I will cover the third part of the study, and then the conclusions. So the third part of the study looks in the future use of UN evaluation evidence and what external stakeholders, so donors, identified there. So first of all, they do appreciate the breadth of evaluations that are produced, but they see challenges with the strategic utility of evaluations, and this in very specific interests. So it's not about, or their ask is not to produce more evaluations, but to produce evaluations that are better aligned with forward-looking questions and with the of interest. I'll just go through a couple of them. So first, long-term and sustained impact. So what they're interested in is whether changes are lasting, changes are at system level, and changes are transformative. And so to go beyond the immediate outputs or short-term outcomes. But to assess actually structural change, institutional resilience, as this helps them to inform long-term decisions on funding and programming. The second is on cross. So they do want to see more evaluative depth on gender equality, climate resilience, disability inclusion, and conflict sensitivity, and not to address this only or as mostly seen by them as a secondary consideration into other evaluations, because that also helps them to identify targeted actions and work on strategy. National ownership and localization efforts. So what they're interested in is understanding how UN agencies support national systems, transfer capacity, and enable locally led solutions. And so to go beyond evaluating only whether partnerships exist, but really to look into the quality of these partnerships, their sustainability, and their equity. Then another element is the UN system-wide coherence and coordination, and that is to what they find a limitation in agency-specific evaluations is that it does not provide insights into interagency complementarities or duplication, and therefore it does not enable them to understand the system-wide performance. And then the last element is the adaptive capacity and innovation, and that speaks to the current situation with overlapping crises, complex operating environments, where donors want to understand to what extent UN agencies are adapting their strategies, whether we are innovating under pressure, and whether we contribute to system level resilience. Next. So overall, in terms of I think I haven't, I'll just turn off my camera. No, it's blocked. I apologize for that. In terms of bridging the gap between demand and supply, what I say is overall evaluations are broadly perceived as credible and useful. However, they do perceive a significant gap between the supply and the demand, and that is due to several factors. So one that comes up, and I think that we all know, is the misalignment of timelines between evaluations and then the planning and the decision-making cycles. And so when evaluation evidence comes in too late, it does not serve the purpose anymore of informing these strategic decisions. Another thing is the overly narrow scope, and agency evaluations often tend to focus on operational compliance and to prioritize that over strategic insights. And so therefore evaluations also are less likely to inform more policy decisions or reflections. Another element is methodological rigor and analytical depth. So they do see and perceive variations in methodological rigor and analytical depth. And so sometimes they perceive evaluations, or they see that evaluations are too descriptive, and then that undermines the trust in the findings and therefore also the use for decision making. And then a last element is stakeholder engagement. And so they do confirm that when there is limited engagement from the start by external stakeholders, including affected population, in shaping the evaluation planning and design, in shaping the evaluation question, it limits the uptakes, because the users then do find the findings less relevant to them. They also identified, proposed some actions or some orientations for improving the alignment. That's on the next slide. And so first of all, early engagement with the stakeholders early on in the process, diversification of evaluation products, and having products that meet better the varying needs of different types of users. Technical experts, policy leads, political audience, they do need different products. Thinking of briefs, synthesis reports, visual summaries, dashboards, etc. So a broader palette of communication products. What came out is that there is a clear interest and demand for more synthesis and meta-analysis. Why? Because it offers a more comprehensive perspective on some thematic or geographical areas, but also reveals patterns in operational effectiveness, policy coherence, etc. Improve dissemination practices. So what donors appreciate there is that when we move from passive publication to proactive communication and engaging with users on the findings. Thinking of roundtable discussions, reaching out to relevant platforms, having briefings with target users, etc. And then also the joint agenda setting and sharing a joint or having a joint evaluation databases. Next, please. So this one summarizes the key aspects of what we just covered. I think we can skip that to avoid duplication and then go to the conclusions, which are on the next slide. So what the consultant identified is it is confirmed as being an understudied dimension. So looking into the external use or the use by external actors of evaluations of the UN system. We also have to underline, and Robert will probably mentioned that in the beginning, so that the evaluation was conducted, or the study was conducted in a time of considerable transition and uncertainty. So the data collection started end of last year, but really took place in January, February, and that was also the moment when we had the budget cuts and where it was difficult to reach out and to talk about evaluation. But despite that climate, the picture is perhaps more positive than we expected on evaluations. So not only are evaluations accessed by external stakeholders, but also actively used in the different types of use: instrumental, conceptual, symbolic, and trans-institutional. So from headquarters to field, from technical to policy units. There is often the common assumption that UN evaluations have limited strategic relevance, but that is not confirmed. So the study does reveal that when evaluations are designed and delivered appropriately, they do contribute to a broader evidence base and to informing decision-making processes. And then last is that there are persistent challenges that we still have, which we addressed in the earlier slides, and that we need to continue to address these to unlock the full potential of evaluation, because that hampers the use of evaluation. With that, and that's on the next slide, the study also identified 3 key lessons. So evaluation is confirmed as a public good with system-wide utility, and that we can better serve the information needs of different users. And that relevance of evaluation is a function of how the process is conducted and how it aligns with the needs and how well the communication is done on and throughout the evaluation. And also that UNEG is uniquely positioned as a convener and thought leader in reimagining evaluation. So not only as a mechanism of oversight, but really addressing that gap that we have, or making that bridge between evidence and then the use of it across institutions. So the overarching conclusions from the study is that we need to make a shift from supply-oriented to a demand-informed and purpose-driven approach. The second is that evaluations are external or are seen externally as signals of rigor, performance, and they do have the potential to contribute to the relevance of multilateral cooperation. But that is when they're done with rigor and address well the different needs. So for UNEG, the study both validates the current efforts. I think a lot has been, and the study confirms a lot that we do is relevant or is confirmed as being relevant, and that we have a challenge on strengthening that looking forward, so that we rethink or recalibrate what evaluations are, who they serve, and how they are shared. And last, it also is an opportunity to reposition evaluation as a central pillar in the UN response to in this evolving landscape and context. So that's for the conclusions. I'll stop here and over to Natalia.
Thank you so much, Miriam and Alan and Robert, for the insightful presentation. Very interesting results. And you've given us a lot to think about, including some insights on the primary modalities of use and how they can overlap, as well as some perspectives on the persistent gap between the supply of evaluations and the demand for their use, and how we need to make a shift to a demand-informed and purpose-driven approach, Miriam, which you just mentioned in the conclusions. I personally especially appreciated how you highlighted the need for improved alignment between the evaluation function and the decision-making needs of external actors, including the enabling factors for use, and also the request from external stakeholders for diversified and user-friendly reporting formats and dissemination strategy, which I think we as UNEG have ventured into it, but there's so much more that we can still do moving forward. So thank you so much for that. We're gonna now open the floor for questions and to hear from the participants. Please feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. Justice, would you like to come in?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, thanks very much, and good to see you, Robert. It's been a while, and thanks, Miriam and Sivas. Alnant, mentioned that. No, it's very interesting and really eye-opening on the utilization. It's something that we really not paid much attention. We've been more to the production, and we didn't really focus on the utilization. No, beyond what I've typed in the chat, which is more about our contribution to literature, which is we want to see whether the academia are actually looking at the literature coming in from these evaluations and informing the future of further theory development in academia world is something that maybe could be of interest. But I also want to look at the utility part because at the moment, I think the evaluation, we are more into counting evaluation as the evaluation product, but the insights that come from this, from the evaluations, each insight is its own product, and we really gave it that value. So we end up focusing at the entirety of the entire evaluation, whereas we could have insights for specific people at specific time from the same evaluation. And we've also observed this one in a country context like Lebanon, where we really have to package information depending on the audience. And we realize that there is a lot that actually appears in evaluation, that when we look at it as the entirety of the evaluation report, it might be looking as one product, but within that, each insight is actually a unique product, which has potential to influence strategic decisions at the strategic time. Over.
Thank you so much, Justice, for that reflection. Robert, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much. And you sort of addressed one of the questions we had initially in should this continue or not. And I think what you're raising are quite interesting questions in the sense of how do we ensure that there is proof for use also on that area. And I think so far we've not really managed, partially because the tools are not ready, but at least what we're seeing in our organization is now that we're moving towards more automatic analysis and more handling of large parts of information, I think what you're mentioning, eventually we might be able to find something. But thanks for the inspiring direction for this one. Over.
Thank you so much, Robert. And I don't see any hands raised, but there is a question from Theogene. Theogene, would you like to open the microphone and speak?
Yes, sure. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for this very informative evaluation. I'm curious to know whether the findings were similar across the different type of evaluation used. I don't know whether this question is clear.
Could you elaborate? I don't know, Robert, Miriam, and I would ask, could you elaborate a bit more around the three? You mean the three types of modalities of use?
I can attempt that, and maybe Miriam and Robert can add to that. Actually, it hasn't gone into such a depth, but some elements have been addressed. Like, for example, instrumental use is more commonly reported at the country level, where the decisions are closely tied to contextual dynamics and operational realities, funding cycles, etc. And in some cases, stakeholders also noted that an often overlooked aspect of instrumental use involves the formal management response processes associated with evaluations, and especially when it is, when the UN agencies report the management responses to the executive board. Whereas in conceptual use, stakeholders described using evaluations to reflect thematic priorities and explore some innovative approaches, etc. And this is also relevant for both those working at country and headquarters level, where decisions are shaped by broader institutional agendas. And the symbolic use is more, is particularly relevant in highly prioritized performance-oriented environments where evaluations serve a kind of legitimizing function. For example, evaluations may be cited in aid providers report or used to validate pre-existing decisions. So some elements of different typologies and how those evaluations are used, it is mentioned in the report, but it's not gone into much details. Any additions from your side, Miriam or Robert?
Let's see, Miriam, Robert, I see no reaction.
No.
Thank you, Anand, for answering that, and Theogene for the question. I don't see anyone else raising the hand, or Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Natalia, and thanks to the three presenters for presenting this interesting study. I have a question on whether you have seen any differences between the use of centralized evaluations that the evaluation units at headquarter level conducted and decentralized evaluations. I'm not sure whether this was part of the study, but did you get any insights on that? Are donors more likely to use it at the decentralized level? These, for example, where funds and programs have country offices, or more at the strategic kind of like HQ level for the governance committees, executive boards that exist? That would be interesting to know. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. And Robert, Miriam, and then before we get to Patrick's question, maybe we take another one and you can answer both from Tetsuya Hirano.
Thank you. Thank you very much for important, useful presentation. That's really helpful. I just wanted to sort my thought, although I don't want to divert this discussion. We've been discussing how UN Commission's evaluations are used by external holder, external to the UN system. However, I think everybody can agree that now UN has faced on unprecedented financial crisis over the past decade. As a result, the UN evaluation plan is now largely determined by the availability of funds. At least that's the case for OHHR. The particularly extra budgetary resources. So in my view, this has compromised the independence of the UN evaluation plan with evaluations in the increasingly designed to provide evidence that the UN that meets needs of donor governments. So given these circumstances, it's still meaningful to discuss like this one, how UN evaluation can be used by external stakeholders. But basically, I have a few points in my observation. Number one, which is resource dependency. The UN evaluation's agenda is increasingly shaped by the ability of extra budgetary donor-driven resources rather than by independent assessment of what needs to be evaluated. And secondly, loss of independence, as I mentioned. When donors funds the evaluations, there is a risk that the evaluation question scope and even finding maybe influences explicitly or implicitly by donor priorities. The third point is intended use. Traditionally, evaluations are meant to serve a broad range of stakeholders, including external actors like member states, or government, or civil society, and the public. But it's if evaluations are tailored to donor needs, their broader utility may be compromised. Those are the main points. And then I think it's worth to be aware of the limitation and the risk involved in this initiative. Number one, I would say selective evidence. If evaluations are designed to justify donor priorities, they may ignore or they underplay issues' importance to other stakeholders. Second, reduce the credibility. Over time, if evaluations are seen as donor tools, their credibility and influence with external stakeholders will erode. The last point I would think is missed learning. The UN and its partners may miss opportunities for the genuine learning and then improvement if evaluations are not independent. I think it's important that although I fully agree that this initiative is very, very important and then will improve overall our capacity. But I think it's worthwhile to consider those aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tetsuya, for those reflections. I'll hand over to our presenters. Over to you, Robert.
let me do a first try, and then Miriam and Anat will come in. From what we found on the centralized, decentralized, I do not think we would be able to say it's necessarily the level of evaluation, but it's what types of decisions the various stakeholders will have to make. So at the country level, donors make different decisions than at headquarters level. And the various types of evaluation, some of them cater more for the one decision-making process than to the other decision-making process. And I mean, coming to the reflection of, let's say, is it independent? Are we putting ourselves in a corner or not? I probably would want to disagree a bit, in the sense that if we do evaluation for esoteric purposes to foster the knowledge of the world, but don't make any decisions on it, in my view, it's a bit of a wasted effort. And there are a couple of decision makers around, and donors are one of the decision makers who determine what they are interested in funding. You're absolutely right when you say there is a potential danger that we might want to present things more positive to preserve funding. It is not, let's say, my personal interaction with government representatives here is more like we don't really know what to prioritize because we're lacking the information, and we need evaluation to help us with that. So there seems to be a genuine interest in to understand what works well, what doesn't work well, where's the competitive advantage of the respective organization, rather than just, yes, these are the things that we want. And the independence would need to be preserved by the evaluation function itself. But that said, so I think it's manageable, and I also think that donors do have a credible interest in terms of decision making. So I wouldn't necessarily say we need to ignore them, but we need to recognize they're one of the key decision makers that determine the future of our organizations, and they need to have the best information possible as well. Let me leave it at that, and over to my colleagues.
Perhaps I can try, and then Miriam can add in. There are 6 or 7 elements that the study identified. One is the timing, the other one is the accessibility, and then the credibility and independence, the contextual relevance, stakeholder engagement, and ownership and dialogue. So there are several elements which are all probably known to us, who have been engaged in managing evaluations and conducting evaluations. But beyond that, it hasn't gone into such details about decentralized versus headquarters. But it's again the question of quality, timeliness, and contextual relevance, and all those things. The other thing is around the question around stakeholder engagement, and the studies clearly says that the stakeholder engagement during the evaluation process was viewed as critical. And when the external stakeholders are consulted during planning phase or are able to interact with the findings prior to publication, they are more likely to use the results. And this reflects the importance of ownership, and as well as the opportunity to contextualize findings in dialogue. And in our experience also, many of our evaluations, even if it is timely, if it is, engaging the stakeholders early on, and that's a known fact that there's a more likelihood of using the results for further, different types of uses we identified. Over to you, Miriam, if you want to add anything.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Because I'm on two devices now. Okay, great. Thank you. Apologies for that. Maybe speaking to the donor needs, I don't think it's either or. I think what the study highlights, it puts a light on things that we are already doing, but maybe not sufficiently thorough. Evaluating long-term results, whether changes are lasting, whether changes are at system level, transformative. These are challenging things to evaluate, but it's also in our interest to do that. But often I think we shy away from that because it's hard to address methodologically and also to have good findings. The same on the cross-cutting teams. I must say this came as a surprise to me, and maybe with the donor landscape changing, that might change as well. But their need for a critical analysis of these teams, it is true. I see it in the evaluations, in our evaluations as well, that we don't address it sufficiently or not consistently sufficiently. And so I think we can make these comments for all the elements that they raised. Stakeholder engagement, the same, and also speaking to the point of Anand, I think it's in all our evaluation processes. But do we really take the time to go and listen to the different stakeholders before we start, or do we assume a lot, right? So I think it really is also an invitation to put a stronger light on things that we are doing and to address or to use this to address maybe weaknesses that we have in the system. And then maybe also wanted to quickly pick up on the difference, if we saw differences in the different types of use, like symbolic use and then conceptual instrumental. I think conceptual instrumental are quite linked, right? Like if we have a better understanding of, for example, gender, it does help to better conceive programs, but also to influence policy decisions and to craft or to inform policies and strategies. I think maybe on the symbolic part, that's maybe a different part. So that's much linked to accountability, doing an evaluation because we need to do it and just showing that we did it, right? And so that is more like evaluation as a bit of a tick box. But I think this study, we can leave that aside. We know we have the system, we conduct evaluations, but the study is an invitation to rethink or think really differently about our users and about also including our external users and not be or maybe move a bit away from being too much inward looking. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert and Anna Miriam, for those reactions. We are reaching the end soon, but we have time for a few more questions, and we have Antonio Canaviri. Hi, Antonio. Nice to see you in the chat. With another question, Antonio, would you like to open the floor and ask the question, or?
Sure. Nice to see you, Natalia, Miriam, and colleagues. Yeah, we are trying to work in UNICEF and try to see how we can follow up recommendations and actions in the management response, but not only in the 2-year period that we have in our current system in EASY, but we are trying to see if we can do some sort of follow up after the evaluation report has concluded and was disseminated. Is it worth to do this in order to see additional uses or additional effects of use of the evaluation? That's the question mainly about. Thank you.
Colleagues, any reactions from your side? I think they're still thinking about it, Antonio.
I mean, sort of have an opinion on it, but one of the challenges, I think, this is not really part of the study. Yeah? So what you say is a general truth. It's helpful, but we wouldn't be able to say anything about has that come up with external stakeholders. They're interested in some different topics in longer term. So maybe that process will help generate the information they're looking for. but we wouldn't necessarily be able to say anything about the follow-up with them.
True.
Yeah, maybe if I can add to that, and then speaking to one of the conclusions or referring to one of the conclusions. So what the study revealed is that the assumption that we often hear and I think are confronted with, that evaluations have limited strategic relevance. This is not confirmed by the study. It's if or when we do them in an appropriate way, they are relevant and they are used. And I think picking up signs of use might be useful to kind of go against these narratives and to continue to position evaluation as a strategic instrument in an organization. So that is what I would see also of interest of capturing these signs. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miriam and Robert. I don't see any more hands or reactions in the chat, but I did, we're reaching the end, and I did want to ask a final question. Maybe Miriam, in the presentation, you mentioned as an overall conclusion, something about UNEG being, strategically positioned to be a convener. And the study basically highlights that UNEG, we are strategically positioned to act as a convener and thought leader, and reimagining evaluation not only as a mechanism of oversight, but as a bridge between evidence and strategy across institutions. And as UNEG members yourselves, and this question goes to Miriam, Robert, and Anne, but also to the participants in the chat, how do you think UNEG should best do this? We are already doing some things, but what does this mean in practical terms for us moving forward if we think of our next plan for next year?
Robert, you want to start?
I mean, okay, I give you all time to think about it. Huh? I think as what the study most urgently says is it speaks more to the individual UNEG members than to UNEG as a whole. So because it highlights that when we are setting up evaluations, there are other things that we really should consider if we want this to be used at a higher strategic level. So it's basically what we find from other work on use of evaluation. The more it's prepared, the more it is contextualized, the more useful the results and the more used the results at all levels, including the external. From, let's say, UNEG as an organization, I think it's a bit tricky in the sense that I'm not sure if this necessarily would lend itself towards guidelines or, I mean, we have this webinar, which is part of the process to help as UNEG, but then beyond that, I'm not sure if guidelines would be appropriate, especially since the conditions are changing so fast. So I fear they would be outdated by the time we create them. But to keep exploring, I think, is really the duty. And now I gave time for Miriam and Anna to think.
Okay, I can come in here as well. I think what it does, it confirms the role that we're playing, right, in being also that space where we can think about how we conduct evaluations, what we can do better, and join forces in doing that. And I think for me, maybe the surprising thing is that the aspects that are often difficult in an evaluation, and I believe in which we all spend much time, like trying to engage the stakeholders, thinking differently about communication. So really having a solid communication phase at the end of an evaluation that is well thought through, that has different products, that engages actively with the users. I think we're all under pressure of time and you just move on to the next evaluation, but it reinforces the importance of that and gives us also a tool to create more time for that in our organizations. I think what it does too, perhaps, is also highlighting the importance of what is quite new or newer. I would say it's the importance of evaluation synthesis. I think maybe often it's a bit done now as an add-on, but maybe having really a synthesis branch and investing thoroughly in that. I think that's really maybe something that really comes out of this study, and then including the users better and really being conscious of the fact that these external users, they do have needs that we can cover as well. So it's end-end, it's not either or, but we need to take time for that and also follow the processes that we have and apply the processes that we have so that it results in the external users being well involved. Over to Anand.
Thanks, thanks, colleagues. I think to me, the most important element of this study is about how I mean, quite often what we do is internally looking evaluations. We conduct evaluations looking at our own internal stakeholders. And this study shows that there are elements that we need to clearly keep in mind when we conduct, manage, commission evaluation. So that's, and especially when at the country level, I think the example from Jordan and the case studies certainly points to that. At country level also, when the evaluation reports are coming from the country level, it's also reaching to the regions and the HQ level from the country stakeholders. I mean the donors and other stakeholders. So that's an element we should certainly keep in mind. That's it from my side. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for answering those questions. Yeah, still a lot to think and do, I feel. We are reaching the end. We have 2 minutes left. I did miss a question from Lloyd Masomera. Robert, Miriam, and Anand, I invite you to answer if possible in the chat, react in the chat. The chat will remain open for the participants to share and react. But thank you very much to everyone. Apologies, Lloyd, for missing the question in the chat. So as we wrap up, a big thank you to all of you for sharing the study results and everyone who joined in this discussion and shared those reflections and thoughts. There is a poll open that Hochika just posted some minutes ago. I invite all of you to answer. It's very important for us to help us improve our future webinars. And thank you again for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you before the end of 2025 for our last webinar, which will probably take place in November. Wishing you all a great day, afternoon, or evening. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you. Bye-bye.